Good morning, everybody. It's Peter Bolland. Welcome to our little Zoom gathering. Thanks, everybody, for logging on and finding us. This is our Friday morning series called Friday Reflections. So thanks to everybody over there at SanDiegoOasis for sponsoring this, for hosting this, for making this happen. A lot of people behind the scenes doing great work. I'm just sitting here in my house like I bet all of you are. I got my mandatory San Diego County bandana now, so I'm ready to go to the grocery store and walk my dog and do other essential outings. This is what we're all recommended to be having now. These are strange times, and I'm so grateful that we have technology like this and the ability to gather in this strange way and see each other and think through some things and just get a little taste of what we used to do when we used to get together in these big rooms. I miss you all terribly, everybody at Oasis, and let me just give a shout out to my other families, all of my friends at Osher. I know a lot of you are on this Zoom meeting with us, all of my friends from the Full Moon Sangha that we don't get to have in person anymore either, and whoever all else is joining us here in this meeting, welcome and good morning. So today's theme is war stories. War stories. And I got to thinking about it this way. You know, here we are a few weeks in to this difficult, trying time, a few weeks into our isolation, a few weeks into our stay-at-home order, only venturing out for the most, essential things, groceries, the pharmacy, walking the dog, getting a little exercise, staying far away from everybody. We've all sacrificed a lot and given up a lot and lost our ordinary routines. And for some of us, this isn't a joke. This is a serious health challenge, those of us with compromised immune systems of a certain age, and so on and so on. There's a lot of soul disruption, no doubt about it, happening right now. And one of the challenges I'm facing, and I bet you are too, is how to keep this all in perspective, how to keep it all in due proportion. Because fear does have a way, doesn't it, of kind of throwing you over its shoulder and running off into the hills with you against your will. Spent a little time recently, waking up at 3 a.m, just me and a couple of great horned owls out in the trees, worrying about things. I'm worrying. I don't think they're worrying. The rabbits are plentiful this time of year. But one of the things that I've started to reflect on is my own family's war stories. And I don't necessarily mean literal war stories. In my case, it is literal war stories. But I know that if you look back into your own life and into your forebearers, your parents, your grandparents, we all have amazing family stories of people who made it through really, really hard times. And I'm wondering if maybe taking the time now to touch back onto that reality helps you and I put this in the right frame, put it in the right size. My mother and father emigrated to the United States in 1950 from the Netherlands. So they were both in Holland during the Nazi occupation. And my father was rather new to Holland in this sense. My father was born in Indonesia in 1926. And he was the son of some Dutch colonists. His father was a school teacher who taught in a Shell oil company town in Indonesia. And so my dad grew up in a kind of Dutch community in the South Pacific and spent the first 17 years of his life there with the volcanoes and the orangutans and the tropical weather. And every 6 years, they would take the boat back to Holland for 6 weeks, kind of a hiatus. And my dad would get a sense of what Holland was like. But then they'd go back home to the tropics. But in 1939, his family took that every 6-year trip back to Holland, but they got stuck in Holland because I think you all know what was happening to the world in 1939. World War II was beginning, the Blitzkrieg. Adolf Hitler and the Nazis were conquering Poland and all the rest of it, and then Holland. So once Europe was occupied by the Nazis, my father and his family were stuck in Holland. And he never saw Indonesia again. And my father's family and my mother's family were friends. So they met when they were in their adolescent teen years, and later they, of course, fell in love. Now, my mom's experience during the war was brutal, of course. Starvation, no potatoes to eat, people boiling potato peels in Vaseline, frying potato peels in Vaseline, going to the outlying regions around their city, begging from farmers for food. These are some really formative experiences in my young mother's life when she was a teenager. And my father, as a 19, 20-year-old, 21-year-old, was an apprentice printer and was taken by the Nazis to Germany to work in forced labor as a printer, printing German war bonds and living, far away from his sweetheart, my mom, and not knowing if they would ever see each other again. And my father told a story about one night he was able to get out of his host family's house and go to the little theater in the little town where he was in Pritzwalk in what is now East Germany, and went to the movies and saw a movie and got this premonition like he shouldn't be there, like he maybe ought to leave. And he left in the middle of the film and was walking home, and he could hear the distant drone of the Allied bombers coming. And he heard the bombs falling. And the horror of the war was the background of everyone's lives. But in the foreground, something rose up. He heard a nightingale. He heard a bird's song in a linden tree over his head as he was walking through the lanes back to his home. And he wrote about it many years later that something broke through in that moment, that when he heard that nightingale's song, it all shifted into a new perspective, that the war and the travails of man, the horror that we inflict on each other, the struggle of life is, of course, very real, but there's something underneath that is eternal, that is changeless, that nature isn't really a part of that. That no matter the drama that humanity gets involved in, the deer are giving birth to fawns in the forest. The spring flowers are bounding up out of the meadow. And in a very comforting way, there is a continuity that the turmoil of our surface lives simply doesn't reveal for us. And I think about that in terms of my own, quote unquote struggles these days, having to wear this when I go to the store, having to work remotely from home. And I'm so grateful both Lori and I are able to work from home, and we're fine. And those war stories from my family help me put everything back into perspective. The idea that there is this eternal order right below the surface of all the chaos is profoundly comforting to me. And in a way, we're fighting a different kind of enemy today. We are not invaded by the Nazis. We are fighting an invisible enemy that is taking some of our lives, that is threatening the livelihood of millions and millions and millions of people, and the entire human family around the world is in a battle with an invisible foe. And that universalizes the experience across all centuries, across all borders, across all cultures, and throughout all families. And that, of course, is what war also does. It binds us together against a common enemy. And all of these conflict stories from your own family, I know you have parents or grandparents that lived through the Great Depression, that lived through, we have African-American friends who grew up in the South during the Jim Crow era, and they remember whites only and blacks only drinking fountains. And they remember as children going to elementary school named after a Confederate general, named after a slave owner. And we look back into our family stories for strength, for continuity, to know that in every generation, in every era, in every life, in every decade comes a new challenge like this. And for those of us, and most of us will, for those of us who make it through this, we will never be the same. And we will have war stories for many, many years to come, and looking back on those that came before us. So I'm so grateful that my family was able to share with me their firsthand account of living through this completely dramatic event, namely World War II in Nazi-occupied Holland. And I wonder if this isn't also making you think, it's making me think about this a lot, about how important it is to pass our stories on. And so many of us of a certain age, in our 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s, man, we got some stories to tell, and we have the technology to tell it. Get your phone, start talking into the phone like I am right now on YouTube videos. Tell your childhood stories, the ones you haven't yet shared with your family, maybe the most scary ones, the most painful ones. Share your war stories with your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren yet unborn. Now is the time for memorializing those stories. Stories are how we teach. Stories are how we learn. Stories are how we remember. Consciousness lives in stories. Don't keep yours hidden away. I'm taking that with me from this COVID-19 experience, as we all find these new digital ways of interacting with each other. So I'm grateful for you for joining with me today. I hope you all got your bandanas, so that when you go out into the beautiful San Diego weather today, you have some sense of safety. I think we all know these aren't going to protect us, but we wear these to protect others, to keep our respiratory cloud contained. And for me, it kind of is it kind of looks all right. You can't see my little baggy turkey waddle anymore. It's kind of oddly fashionable. I think I'm going to do this bandana thing from here on out. So, listen, we're doing this every Friday morning. We're calling it Friday Reflections. So thanks for joining us all again. And I'll see you guys next Friday, just before 10 o'clock. I'll play us in with a little hold music on my guitar, as I did this morning. And next week, I want to think about this topic. Maybe you can reflect on this week as we go through our adventure, our COVID-19 adventure. Let's think next Friday about the rites of spring. Here we are in the heart of springtime. I see it busting out everywhere in the natural world, which seems to be kind of enjoying our absence, frankly. And that is such a potent archetypal time of year, isn't it? Spring, when the earth comes back to life. And we know this terrible time will end, and we will spring forth into our new life, whatever shape that's going to take. So next Friday, join me for some reflection on the theme of the rites of spring. See you on the other side.